Hey, what's going on?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How about you?
I'm doing good. Thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview.
Yeah, thanks for having me and for rescheduling, even though it was only like 2 hours. But
No worries at all. I'm so used to getting ghosted when it comes to doing interviews. The fact that there was a reschedule,
uh,
that's no problem at all.
yeah, I've dealt with them too, and I'm like, all right, well, let's still try to get this done.
Uh,
So
oh, totally. Well, it's great to be able to talk to you, and this is one I've actually been wanting to do for a long time because you have so many great accomplishments under your belt when it comes to the work that you do and the passion that you have behind music. And it's great to be able to see like all of that culminating here and some upcoming work that you got going on as well.
thanks, man. Yeah, it's always so like rewarding to know anybody cares about what I'm writing about, and it's always so strange to like talk about it online because part of me feels like I'm constantly like trying to get attention and saying like, "Hey, look at me." But the other side is like, if people are interested in what I'm doing, here's what I'm doing. So I never really know how it comes across.
Oh, it's such a fine balance to try to be able to find that. And I know I go through that myself. Anytime I promote
Yeah,
myself, I feel like I'm doing it too much, and it can only be one time I'm promoting myself and it feels like it's too much.
yeah. I mean, it's better, I guess, to be kind of self-aware of that than to kind of have the ego.
Oh, exactly. I mean, it's not like we're going through like Facebook Messenger and just like sending our links to people who didn't ask about it. And it's like, hey, check this out. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, I've had that happen. I'm sure you've had people who just message you with like, "Hey, here's a whole bunch of stuff I want to shove in your face," and it's like, no thanks.
It's funny because that actually just happened yesterday. Someone unfriended me a couple years ago after I did an interview with them, and they
Huh.
just announced a tour, and I got a message back with him trying to re-add me. It's like, hey, we're coming to town. Would you like to buy some tickets?
Like, no.
Oh,
I kind of
I thought that was so great.
I had something kind of similar happen that I just reviewed. I can't remember his name. Like his this guy's album for a magazine, and I had to like ask him a question about the label. I was like, "Hey, I'm reviewing this. Do you have a label? Is it self-released? Like, I just don't know what to put." And he told me. And I'm like, "Oh, great." So then he like emailed me yesterday. He's like, "Hey, just so you know, we got the first music video out." And it's like, I get it. I like the music, but it doesn't necessarily mean I want updates on like everything that's going on, and I'm going to promote everything you're doing, but I get it.
Oh yeah, and again, it comes with that fine balance. But every time that I see you promote yourself, I mean, it's always for a good cause. It's always with new material. It's always it's always intriguing stuff too. I mean, you have a way with like writing and such a great no bullshit style to your writing, which I really appreciate.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean I think that's one of the things that I try to do to set myself apart, and also just I don't know, like maybe a trademark, but also just something I kind of want to encourage other people who do what we do to do, which is to just like be honest and to not try to like get the clicks and not try to like kind of I don't want to say sell out, but like kiss up to people because you know them or because you want to get like the press quote. It's like, especially if you're doing reviews, you have to be honest with what you think. So I always try to be blunt and just say, like, hey, here's what I thought of it.
And I appreciate that so much too, because just like you said, there are so many people that are looking for those press quotes that really just want to see their site or their company underneath the logo for an upcoming album, and just like like they care about that more than the actual album itself. They just want to get themselves recognized rather than the actual material.
Yeah, totally. I mean that I still love seeing my name in places, and if not the name, just like the quote and the publication. So I don't think that ever goes away, but it's like, you have to be honest to your opinion, even if it's the outlier opinion. And there's been so many albums, I'm not going to put anybody on the spot or any bands on the spot, but there's been so many times where I'll see like a review that says it's their best album yet, or it's the best thing they've done in 10 years. And it's like, really? You think this is better than that? Like, no, it's not. Stop trying to just like get the attention.
I think a lot of that also just comes from like the hype of a new album as well too. I mean, there are some of those people, it's like the newest thing that they hear, they're gonna think is the best thing that they hear. And it's kind of like that psychosomatic thing that kind of goes on to where it's either the brand new thing that you really enjoy from a band, or you're always going to hold a band to the level of when you first discovered them. That's what I've been noticing a lot lately.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's partially like the excitement of getting this new album, and you know, I think a lot of people are just excited to be a part of the press like junket and all that. And like yeah, like the nostalgia too. Like, yeah, okay, you grew up with this band, or this band is the reason you got into metal or you got into writing. And yeah, I mean, that always plays a part. We're always biased, but I always want people to kind of look past that and say, like, if you didn't know who this album was from, or if you weren't like Facebook friends with this artist and you didn't know that they were going to see your review, because I think that's part of it as well, is like, you know, that people are going to see what you were saying about them. What would you honestly say about this album? Would you still praise it or would you not? Like, and you know, if it's not, then you have to be honest.
It's so true. And again, that's what I appreciate about your style so much. And you do let people know about that as well too. And especially over the last few years, I mean, being able to see your name on so many different kinds of publications, I mean, it's just incredible to see like all of the work that you do on so many different platforms.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's constantly like a hustle to get more work and to, you know, make a name for yourself and keep promoting yourself, and just yeah, trying to be like an active voice in the community, and you know, kind of a recognized voice without like trying to bring ego into it, but just trying to kind of work to establish credibility, I guess, and to that level of people kind of knowing your style and knowing your viewpoint and trusting you.
Oh, absolutely. So thinking about that as well too, I mean, like, how did you know this was a direction that you wanted to go in?
With like writing about
Uh,
music in general.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Like I kind of got into both sides of music writing at the same time. When I was about like 11, 12, I was really into like fiction. And that's technically like what my background is fiction. And like running a creative arts journal. So I was reading like, I remember specifically like Chuck Palahniuk was a huge influence, and he still is. I mean, I teach Fight Club every semester. So as I was getting into like creative writing and all of that, I was getting immersed into the music, and I have so many memories of being like you know, eighth grade, ninth grade, just starting high school, and my dad playing me these albums in the basement, and that's really what I have to give credit to, is my father for introducing me to Jethro Tull and classic Genesis and Yes and all that, and just kind of giving me this intense passion for it. I mean, like the first half of the year of freshman year or so, when what was that, like 2000, yeah, like end of 2001 to 2002, I must have listened to like a Passion Play and Thick as a Brick and Foxtrot and The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway like every day after school. So it was just this insatiable love for this music that nobody else in my, you know, age group was listening to, and I was very elitist about it. And I like to think I've become a lot less elitist. I'm much more open to other kinds of music, than just progressive and metal and all. But it was just kind of this discovery of, you know, songs can be 40 minutes long, and I have to tell everybody about this. And then when I got to college and in a '05, I immediately started writing for the newspaper. And I said, like, I want to write about music. I want to spread the word about some of this stuff, whether it's older albums, newer albums. So I remember like some of the first things I wrote about, I would say like ever, were Opeth Ghost Reveries, Snow by Spock's Beard, I remember writing about. And just from there, it took off of me just emailing websites and just trying to get higher and higher with it, and, you know, just turn it into as much of a living as I can, as well as just a passion.
Oh, that's just incredible. And it's great to see that you were able to find a great source of being able to discover music, and then being able to take that passion of being able to discover music and bring that to bigger horizons with that as well.
Yeah, and it's still one of the biggest rewards, I guess, is the ability to kind of talk to people that like my dad grew up listening to, and his friends, and just like other people I know, like the chance to kind of ask musicians questions that, they've wanted to ask and never got the chance. I remember, um, this was around like 2011, I guess, when I did a phone interview with John Anderson from Yes, and like I called him, and I guess I called him a little early, and he said he was out getting provisions. He was like shopping, and could I call him back? And I was like, oh, absolutely, Mr. Anderson. I ran downstairs and like John Anderson's food shopping, and I interrupted him. And it's just like things like that that you get to kind of like pay back to the person who got you into it in the first place is so rewarding.
Oh, it really is. And when you're able to have those platforms that you currently have and have been had and you've had for quite a long time now. I mean, just being able to build up that name and promote the music that you care about, and trying to steer people clear of the music that is not worth checking out as well too. I mean, again, like I mentioned, it's that fine balance, but you're doing such incredible work with both sides, and especially with promoting bands that you do have that passion behind, and being able to either write the articles about it, write reviews about it, or full-on books about it.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean that is like the greatest joy of it is promoting artists that you think deserve it, and not not enough people you think have heard about. I mean, like Major Parkinson is a band that I always try to tell people about. The Deer Hunter is like always my number one answer for a band that everyone should know about is the Deer Hunter. Um, and just like, that's why I think that a lot of people get kind of corrupted by whether or not they're making money at it, and kind of like the more business side of it. And that's always part of it, but you can't lose that passion of just saying, I know about a band that other people need to know about, and how can I best like spread the word and kind of constantly be their cheerleader as best I can.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes it takes also hearing those bad albums or bad bands in general that really help you appreciate how great the bands and the albums that you truly care about really are.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying before of like being honest, I've talked to a lot of like colleagues about it, and a lot of people on social media, and even like close friends of mine, of the balance between like expecting a band to stay true to who they are but still do interesting things, and like where do you draw the line between kind of calling a band out for just repeating themselves. And it's, I think in general, like fans of music aren't always sure what they want either. If a band makes the same album over and over again, they could be upset, but if they don't, they're upset. And I don't know. I always try to think of like bands that kind of do have a style, but they're not always repeating themselves. Like, like Mastodon, it's not that they're breaking new ground with every album, but they're doing enough that's interesting that warrants a new album. Or Between the Buried and Me, they're always sounding like themselves, but each album does something different enough. Whereas I think there's other bands that are way too formulaic, and again, you got to be willing to say like, look, I like your style, but you're kind of just treading water here. You're kind of just being safe, and you got to push artists to be artists, and progress by definition, like change things up.
Do you remember that first band where you discovered that you could really find that formulaic sound, and writing that down and being able to spread that message about like, hey, these guys aren't doing everything that they're capable of?
I think like the easy band to kind of pick for for that is Dream Theater. And again, like my book before this, I wrote a book on Dream Theater. I love Dream Theater, but I think they've made the same album for the last three albums at least, more or less. Um, like another artist that I love, and again, I mentioned Spock's Beard, but like Neil Morse, I think kind of makes the same album over and over again, and I still like them. But that's kind of what I was talking about, of people like colleagues of ours like praising these bands, and it's like you could still like what they're doing. I'm not saying you have to dislike what they're doing, but stop acting like it's a brand new thing. It's the same thing, and it's what they do best. And yeah, it is a tough balance, but I think a lot of people just are afraid to I think a lot of people have trouble kind of with like the cognitive dissonance of finding flaws in things they love. And it's like you can be critical of what you love. It doesn't mean you're not a fan anymore. It kind of means you are more of a fan because you're holding them accountable. You're expecting, more from them.
Oh, it can very much be true, and I think Neil Morse is a perfect example of that. I mean, when you say to someone, it's like, "Oh, I can't remember that concept album he did, but it's about the guy who's you know, uh, who sins a lot and does all these bad things, but then he discovers God." It's like that's every single Neil Morse album.
Yeah, I think I was talking to somebody about him, and I said, "How many songs?" Like again, I'm not trying to badmouth him, but they're great. I love. I mean, Snow is one of my favorite albums of all time. Testimony too, I think, is a masterpiece. But I said, "How
Absolutely.
many?" Yeah, I said, like, how many Neil Morse albums start with an overture, and at the very end of the album, the new song ends, and it comes back to a reprise with 3 minutes of outro, and then some kind of message about like, "Hey, everybody, love each other and love yourselves. You're beautiful." And it's like, all right, maybe make an album without that message.
Yeah, and
Uh,
and speaking with that too, it's like I've noticed that so much happening with Transatlantic as well too. Like I can really tell that Neil really wants to be able to get those kind of themes into the music as well.
yeah, I mean, like the Whirlwind has a lot of religious imagery. I mean, something I've said this to Neil in person. I've kind of said like, which I've had other people say, "How dare you ask him that?" But it's like, no, like, and he knows that I like, I know his stuff. It's not like I'm just attacking him. Like it's the passionate fan critic in me. But I've kind of said like, people have said you repeat yourself. Do you think you do? And he basically said, if it works, why change it? And that's a valid point. And he's still, I would say like him and like Dream Theater are the best at what they do. So again, I'm not at all saying that they're not good at it. They're amazing at what they do. It's just what you're getting with them. And if you like that, then by all means, I still like it, but I just again I kind of laugh when people say, "Oh my God, it's a brand new revolutionary thing." It's like it's not.
Oh, definitely. And thinking about that as well too. I mean, the wanted to be able to build this up to be able to talk about the full on books that you've been able to write and going over these retrospectives of bands and
Yeah.
especially with like going into something like Dream Theater who can have some amazing highs and some lower of lows as well too and some stuff right in the middle. I mean, I think Dream Theater is like one of those definitions of bands where like not all of their music is top tier, not all of their music is bottom tier. Like it's just like you can really tell when they want to be able to work hard and when they are kind of just going through the paces. And when you're looking at a retrospective like that, I mean, how is that for you? Like when you're starting off with When Dream and Day Unites and then being able to go through the whole catalog. I mean, how is that for you being able to go through their history?
I mean, it's interesting to see like the no pun intended, but like the progression and how they grew as like songwriters, and especially when James LeBrie um, came into the picture, how much of a better vocalist he is. And I still defend him. I mean, I in going through all the Dream Theater albums, I honestly haven't really noticed a lot of change in his voice in a negative way. Like I know a lot of people are critical of him. They say, they should get rid of James LeBrie. And I mean, I've noticed a few little things here and there, especially, after he had his whole issue with singing and throat infection and all. But I really defend his voice even now. I think he sounds pretty much as good as always. Um, but I think there's certainly a point where you can tell that they're just kind of going through the motions. And another side of that is like, well, how do you expect a band that's been doing it for decades to keep like, changing things? And it's like, well, I don't. I understand why they're doing what they're doing. But yeah, it's just kind of it's more disappointing, I think, when you see like how high they've been and where like Scenes from a Memory is the obvious answer for their best album. I do think it's their best album. I think it's maybe the best progressive metal album ever made. So I don't expect everything to like come close to that. But it's definitely clear where things have kind of stopped progressing and maybe where things picked up again. Like I'm a big defender of The Astonishing. I don't love it, but I kind of say like, hey, it's something new. I respect the hell out of them for doing this, even if it didn't work all the way.
And it's funny, that's my girlfriend's favorite album from Dream Theater is The Astonishing.
Yeah. It's a little too like soap opera for me at times. It's a little it's a little cheesy. And I think that's something I definitely noticed with them in general, especially starting with like Black Clouds. I think a lot of the lyrics got a little like corny. Like I remember there's some song on, oh, it's I think a rite of passage where he says like turn the key, walk through the gate. And I'm like, that's
The chorus, yes.
I was like, I think when I wrote it, and this pissed off one of my friends, but I think when I wrote it, I said this song could be like on the soundtrack of a like pretty white people with problems like Dawson's Creek kind of like show. I'm like, this is whereas previous songs they've done, like The Spirit Carries On is just like a great song. It's kind of romantic, it's kind of soft, but it's a great bit of songwriting. Or like God, what's the last song on the first disc of 6 Degrees of Inner Turbulence? Disappear, I think.
Disappear. Yep.
Yeah, like that's a great song. Like they, I think Dream Theater get a lot of unnecessary or unqualified flack for just being like speedy, what they call, I guess, like wanking. Like there's a lot of that in there. But if you compile like a list of the best Dream Theater songs, which is different than the best tracks, there's a big difference to me between a track and a song. So the best songs of Dream Theater are great songs. So I kind of defend them in that sense too. And yeah, the astonishing people say, yeah, they've kind of like ripped off 2112. And I mean, discussing like I had to have it for the book, I had to have an entry for every like 10 or 20-second intermission with the little digital effects. I had to write about that too. So again, I just like it's a flawed album, but I would put that over the self-titled like any day, or even the last two. Like at least it's something different. It's ambitious. The last the self-titled and the last two for me are just way more kind of by the numbers. Even when you get into like the tricky instrumental stuff, there's less like melody to it. Like if you think of like the Dance of Eternity or Stream of Consciousness, like it's tricky, but it's melodic. There's like moments every second you can kind of hum, you can go along with. And I find as you go on to the discography, there's more of just weird, tricky like moments, but it's not serving a purpose.
Yeah, and I mean that's something that I've especially noticed. I mean, especially ever since Jordan joined the band. I mean, like he really loves being able to try out new technology with the keyboards, being able to try new patches and stuff like that. And I think that's really affected the music and a lot of those interludes as well. When you have like those couple second moments that are going on there, and just being able to hear like these unexpected things that don't really serve a purpose, but it in a way it's kind of like showing like what his keyboards are capable of.
Yeah, I mean, and he's innovating with that stuff. He's definitely promoting like new technologies and all, which again, I give him credit for. And he's such a nice guy. He helped me promote the Dream Theater book, which was kind of surreal. And like not only does he know about it, but he's helping me kind of promote it. It was like crazy, but yeah, and it's like he even asked me, I think, when I gave Liquid Tension Experiment 3, I reviewed it for Metal Injection, and he messaged me on Facebook and asked, like, oh, you're the only one who gave it like I think 8 out of 10. Everyone else was giving it like a 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. And he was generally like curious what the difference was. I don't think he was angry at all. And I very clearly like said, to me, this is more just virtuosic playing for the sake of it. Whereas some of the other instrumental stuff you've done has like emotion to it. It ebbs and flows. It's got movement. It's not just like a 7-minute break of trickiness. But I think it was partially that he was kind of surprised that, everyone else was just praising it and I didn't praise it as much. And I think it goes back to what I was saying of people just kind of blindly showering praise on things instead of being more critical of it.
Yeah, and it's great to see that Jordan actually did reach out to you about that as well too. I mean, it actually shows that he is paying attention to what people are saying. And sometimes when you get overshadowed with praise like that, like a Dream Theater, like a Liquid Tension Experiment, like a Jordan Rudess, where you're constantly getting praised all the time, sometimes you do want to seek out the ones that it's just like, well, why isn't this particular person praising everything they do? And it might give them a new perspective on what people are thinking.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate goal of criticism, is to like shed new light and push artists, further. And I think what it comes down to is like with certain artists, like we know that you're at this level. We know you can do this. Like you got enough praise for getting to this point and this level. Now we know you're there. That's the benchmark. That's what we're expecting. What are you doing beyond that? What are you doing to impress us? Because if you're just keeping it where we know you're at, it's again, it's not really like progressing. You're not really pushing yourself. You're just kind of doing the status quo and being complacent, and that's not enough, I would say.
And thinking about that as well too, like I remember seeing these conversations before about when progressive music stops being progressive. Like, what would you call that? I mean, do you think that that deserves a different kind of name than progressive music, or if you're not constantly trying to change yourself?
I mean, I always kind of like using like art rock maybe more. Because that is like an interesting question, is like people think progressive is long songs, tricky time signatures, weird instrumentation, weird like narratives and lyrics, and all of it is that. But even going back to like the famous example of Jethro Tull's "Thick as a Brick," which was like an intentional commentary on prog and not progressive, and the difference between progressive and prog being kind of the more like ostentatious, like self congratulatory showing off, and not making it about the art form. I think that's kind of maybe the difference. Like prog rock is more of the self-congratulatory stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I always try to like highlight bands that I think are doing something like interesting and really pushing themselves. Again, like the going back to the band I mentioned before, like I remember whenever it came out, that Sons of Apollo album,
Yeah.
I I think I gave it like 6.5 at Metal Injection, and I think some people were angry. Not that I'm saying anybody should care. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm famous or anything like that. But some people I do remember kind of complaining about it, and I don't care what people think on the internet. That's the internet. But I remember just kind of thinking like, you're kind of doing a pastiche of like classic rock and Guns N' Roses and Zeppelin, and you're pulling it off amazingly. I mean, you guys are nailing what you're going for, but you could be doing more. Like you could do this stuff, in your sleep. And then I discovered this album, Black Box by Major Parkinson, which I never heard of. And it just like blew my mind. It's similar to like, if people know like Diablo Swing Orchestra or Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum or Unexpect. It's a concept album. It has like motifs repeated through it. It's kind of got orchestral stuff. It's got operatic stuff. And as you know, like you get albums to listen to all the time, and usually, even if you like them, you review them, but then you kind of forget about them because it's just like an assembly line. But this album stayed with me for years, and I just remember thinking like, "Holy shit! Like this is amazing." And it was tricky and it was long, but it was progressive. It was trying something really strange, and I respect that.
And it just goes to show that any band can write any album and it can stick with you. And it's not a time thing like music was better back then or music is better today. Like any album from any period can hit you in a certain way when you discover it. And when you can discover a band like Major Parkinson, who I enjoy as well, and I
Yeah.
don't nearly praise enough, but it's just like they do such amazing work. And with that album in particular, it deserves that praise. And it just shows that, when you discover a band like that and it can just blow you away like that, that there's constantly always going to be good music out there.
Yeah, and so the album I'm talking about, which is great. And like, and if anybody's listening and they haven't, just go on YouTube and look up the song Madeline Crumbles, which is like weird, kind of like almost disco. But it's as soon as that song came on, I was like, what the hell is this? This is so like strange, but I'm into it. And it's so confident. And if you it's just like, what are you saying that warrants your place in the genre? And I think a band like that, they're doing something that you can compare to other people, but they're still doing something interesting.
Oh, absolutely. And to completely flip that around and going a little bit back into Dream Theater, and anytime that you do any kind of long form retrospective on a band, like does the burnout effect happen on you at all? Like when you finished up writing with Dream Theater, for example, I mean, like how long did it take you to be able to enjoy listening to Dream Theater again?
That's a good question. Yeah, because there's definitely a difference. And even like when you're done with it, you can't help but still listen as if you're still writing about them with that analytical ear. So it does kind of like ruin the enjoyment a bit. I would say maybe like a month of just kind of like a month after the book's done, it's submitted, and a month of like listening to other artists and kind of like cleansing the palette. Then I think I'm with all of these bands, I think I'm able to go back and say, all right, I'm not analyzing them anymore. I'm back to just being a fan. So it's easier to get back into than you might think, but it does take a little bit of time. There's definitely a difference between listening as the fan and listening as you're writing a book about them, or even like, just as a reviewer.
Oh, absolutely. And, again, coming back into that fine balance of being able to just put on music to enjoy it or critiquing it. Sometimes you have to turn off your brain to be able to do that. Sometimes it happens subconsciously. I mean, there's so many things that go into it, but I'm glad to see that even when you can go through every single minute detail of a band like Dream Theater and still come out on the other end and still enjoying their music rather than just being completely burnt out on them.
Yeah, I mean, it's if the music holds up and if you have this like deep love for it and it goes back, I mean, Dream Theater, 20 years at least. I've been into them. I remember going to Avatar Studios with some friends to try to sing on, was it Systematic Chaos? And like that's one of my big memories of college. So it's like it's a band that I could never get sick of, and I'll always have like, love for. And it's interesting how and really like as much as I grew to appreciate certain things and grew to like see connections between, not only the Dream Theater, but like Jethro Tull and Opeth. Coming out of all three books, I still prefer the same albums. Like my opinions on the music in terms of how I would rank them and which ones stay with me and which ones I listen to haven't really changed. I still love the same albums and not dislike, but have less need to go back to the same albums.
Oh, and that completely makes sense. And like you mentioned before, too, with the palate cleansing, being able to enjoy different styles of music, being able to do things that don't involve music, like yeah, I see you all the time, like being able to enjoy different TV shows or watching
Yeah.
some shitty horror movies, just enjoying how terrible they are. And, just like being able to have those different palate cleansers in life is just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in those contexts, it's like when there's something that happens with music and some other form of entertainment, it's magical. Like I always say that the most impactful combination of visuals and music and like watching something and hearing something was the end of a show called 6 Feet Under that was on HBO.
Oh, yes.
And if anybody knows that show, I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The last 10 minutes of that show make me tear up just thinking about it. Like they use Sia's song "Breathe Me," and what they show is just like incredible. There's the game series Life is Strange, and pretty much every game has a song in it that has stuck with me that I have to go like, who is this artist? And I have to go listen to them. That's how I discovered one of my favorite artists, Bat for Lashes. Um, so even like when I'm trying to kind of get away from the music, if something like that happens, it brings me right back to the music. And I'm on my phone like saying, what is this song and who is this artist?
Oh yeah, and Life is Strange is such a great example of that. And it's just like I specifically remember the original game and just like tearing up so much during that entire game. And they know how to put the music in at just the right moments. And I love it when a form of entertainment like really knows how to use music rather than just licensing music for licensing's sake. Like they pick the right songs for the right moments to really get that great emotional feel behind it and make you really care.
Oh yeah, that and like the Last of Us is like, especially the second one. It's like, oh my God, the use of music in this. Yeah, I mean, Life is Strange. I was joking to a friend of mine because I really like that series, and I said I guess I have like some part of me is like an emo teenage girl because it's just like I really vibe with like Max and Chloe and what happens at the end of that. And yeah, I distinctly remember like when what was it, Captain Spirit, like the Adventures of Captain Spirit
Oh
came out.
yes. Mhm.
And I was like, all right, this is just a prelude to the second one. Like, let me just get this over. It's like a 2 hour game. And as I was saying, like, there's that scene where you go into his parents' bedroom, his mom's gone, and his dad's like passed out because he's an alcoholic, and he puts on "Moon and Moon" by Bat for Lashes, and you have that scene, and like that moment, as soon as that song came on, I was like, "What is this?" And I'm a big fan of her. I'm a big fan of like sad piano music like that. Like Tori Amos's "Winter" is incredible. And like I always say, the greatest piece of music I've ever heard. If there's one song that I think is the greatest thing I've ever heard, it's a song called "Time as a Symptom" by Joanna Newsom. That's kind of like a piano song, and it evolves. It's very much like progressive pop. It's very much like the offshoot of like Kate Bush, and stuff like that just sticks with me. So yeah, I tend to like sad, introspective music in general.
Yeah, and it's kind of that Steven Wilson effect too. I always
Yeah,
remember his quote talking about how paraphrasing obviously, but just like sad music is so relatable because we all go through that. And when it comes to pop music and just like talking about money and getting drunk and partying every single night, it's just like those are things that people can't relate to, but sad things are things that we can all relate to whether we want to or not.
I agree. Yeah, and it's interesting because it's like, does that make you? It doesn't make you a sad person if you like sad music or sad entertainment. It's just like there's a truth to it that you don't get out of these phony, like Sunshine and Happiness, except for Devin Townsend's Sunshine and
I was
Happiness.
just going to bring that up.
But yeah, I mean, like one of the greatest songs I've ever heard, and I still think, and I told this to him that "Heart Attack in a Lay-By" from In Absentia is the greatest thing he's ever written, and I know a lot of people like it, but that song does not get enough love. That song is genius.
Oh, it really is. I think between that and Collapse Light into Earth are just two of the biggest Porcupine Tree songs that really hit me, especially lately. Which is funny because you know uh, I was known as that drummer guy for so long, and neither one of those features percussion in any kind of way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I
Yeah,
mean,
and
particular. I mean, there's piano in there, obviously, which is considered percussion, but drums and stuff.
yeah, and even a song like "Stop Swimming," which has a little bit of like percussion as it goes into it. Yeah, they're very like empty piano-based songs. And I use those songs also when I like teach my classes and talk kind of about the difference between like emotion and sentimentality, and how like you have songs in entertainment that's so over the top with the emotion that it feels false. And I said the simple fact of a man laying in his car having a heart attack, thinking of his wife saying we'll grow old together when he knows he's about to die. I said that is emotion. Um, you think of like Death Cab for Cutie's "What Sarah Said" when he says, I ration my breath. As I said to myself, I've already taken too much today, or something. Like it's the little subtle slices of life that really capture emotion, and that's the stuff that like hits. Is like the really subtle stuff.
Oh, it's so true, and that just reminds me of like one of my biggest pet peeves that's currently going on with music, and it's being mainly used in movies. It's just like the overly dramatic, orchestrated, stretched out, atmospheric pop songs that turn into like funeral dirges to be able to sell movies. And where it's like these songs that don't have that kind of meaning that they're trying to give it, and they're trying to give that fake meaning behind it.
Yeah, and it's very disingenuous. But then you have like a song like one of the greatest covers ever is Gary Jules' version of "Mad World" that was used in Donnie Darko,
Oh yes.
and the way it's used in that scene and the way it like highlights what's actually happening in the story is brilliant. So it's all like in any case, it's all about like nailing the mood and not trying to get like the biggest spectacle out of it.
Exactly. And that's what like using music effectiveness is for. And going back to like the Life is Strange series for that example, just like using the right music, the right covers, the right orchestration, whatever the case is, it's when it has that authenticity behind it and when it's used in the right moments, it just makes everything just completely click. And it's so great when it's done right. And it's so disheartening when you hear it done wrong as well.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot of the time, like they, it gets into the business side and they want to have like the popular songs in the popular movie, and
And
it's a tough balance.
yeah, and that just reminds me of I think it was last year or the year before when saw the first trailer for the remake of Candyman, and they were using
Uh,
Destiny's Child "Say My Name." It's like, okay, I get it, you say Candyman's name, but that has nothing to do with the movie.
yeah, I think it like in cases like that, it kind of cheapens it. Um, and like for example, I only saw that movie once, but I really liked that remake. Like I'm
I do
typically
too.
against remakes. Um, but I think that movie was much better than the trailer made it look. And like, yeah, you like the movie had more to it than you'd think based on such a kind of like popular song and kind of like a popular kind of trailer. That kind of like undermines the uniqueness of what the movie actually is.
Yeah, and like you mentioned before, it's just like it's meant to sell. And I've noticed this so much when it comes to trailers that the people who actually work on the product have almost nothing to do with the trailers. It's a
Yeah.
completely different company that is just like trying to sell things to people. And even if they are trying to sell it to the wrong kind of audience, they just want to be able to try to make the most profit, which makes sense, capitalism. But it's just when you're really looking into what something is about, and then you just see the flaws and the disingenuous moments behind it, it can take things away. But I guess you also have to look behind that veil too and just see what's really there.
Yeah, and then it leads to a lot of audiences kind of being quote unquote like tricked by the trailer, and then they don't like the movie because it's not what they were promised. But it's like, well, judge them. I would say judge the movie on its own merits and not if it lives up to the trailer, because the trailer's job is to get you in the seat, and then what the actual movie is not their problem. So I think a lot of movies get unfairly like criticized for not being what they promised, but it's like, well, is it better though?
And another example that just rings with that, especially when it comes to the trailer, or at least it hit me that way, was the Nicolas Cage movie that came out last year, Pig, where I thought it
Oh
was just
yeah.
going to be Nick Cage being Nick Cage the entire movie, and it turned out to be something completely different. But I think it worked for that reason.
Yeah, it was much more of like a quiet, introspective. Yeah, I totally expected. I basically expected like Willy's Wonderland, but with him trying to get revenge for a pig. And it was like, no, it's much more subtle than that.
Ex-
And to his credit, it allows him to kind of go against type and prove that he is a decent actor in the right role.
Oh, and he still has that one little moment where he has that Nick Cage come out of him, but the rest of the movie, it's just like it was great to see that different side of him again.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a meme at this point, and rightfully so. But he's a fascinating actor because he's very influenced by like German expressionism, and he knows he's over the top. It's not like he's bad because he doesn't know what he's doing. He's intentionally being this over the top, and it's a fascinating way to act. Like you can't really. It's kind of like you look at like a film by like David Lynch or like Lorgos Lanthimos, and it's like this is intentionally over the top. It's intentionally weird. You can't fault it for being incoherent. It's supposed to be. It's the same thing with his acting, I think.
Oh yeah, and I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I can't wait for that Renfield movie that's going to be coming out where he's playing Dracula. I can't wait to see his take on that.
Yeah, I wanted to reference Vampire's Kiss. Like I still think that I don't know if you saw Color Out of Space.
I haven't yet.
I actually think it's really good. And basically, it's like it's based on the I think was it H.G. Wells, I think. Um, and it's like it's the meteor and it's colored and it makes things happen. and like his performance changes like halfway into it, and I think he's kind of giving a nod to his role in Vampire's Kiss and just the way he acts there, because it's like a fascinating like performance. If anybody listening has not seen Vampire's Kiss, half of the Nicolas Cage memes on the internet are from that movie, and it's just a glorious like train wreck of a movie.
Oh, perfect way to describe it. Glorious train wreck. It's so good for that reason.
Yeah, I've made people like just watch it. Like it's New Year's Eve, we're gonna watch Vampire's Kiss. Trust me.
So good. But now to get things back on track and looking forward to the future, you just wrapped up on another big colossal work, being able to go through an entire new band's discography and just like seeing the changes that they've made. Don't want to give it away yet. I'll let you do that. But what are you doing next?
Yeah, so I just finished up the Opeth book, which is coming out on the 24th this month in the UK, 29th of April in America. And is that what you mean, or do you mean like after?
Oh yeah. Oh well, we'll get to that as well. But yeah, I definitely want to be able to promote Opeth.
Yeah, I mean, as for like after that, I'm not working on any new books. There's one book that I pitched to a band for another publisher, and they kind of weren't into it. The manager wasn't into it. I think the band was. So I may try to go back to that. Um, but for the moment, I mean, like it's such an exhaustive, obviously, like process to do a book like this. So I'm kind of enjoying not having such a big project for now and just kind of doing the smaller freelance stuff in the middle of, trying to pay the bills with teaching.
Yeah, and I do love that as well too. I mean, like you're not just someone that is like going out there and being able to put your thoughts out when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to different things, but you're also teaching these things as well too, which I just think is just so incredible for you to be able to show new generations your thoughts and being able to I think put them in the right direction of how to move forward in your field.
Thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes people have heard, like some of my students have heard of the bands I've written about, or they've like heard of the places or stuff. But yeah, it's nice to be able to kind of merge the two and to share examples of what I've done as examples of what I'm teaching. Like I tend to think my writing style is maybe to a fault, like academic. Um, and I just have like a very set way of writing, and it's good to be able to kind of discuss with my students like what a thesis is, what a paragraph, how like an argument should be structured, and then I can say, you can talk about some major issues in the world this way, or you can write about, like Black Sabbath, and here's an essay I did that, it's about pop culture. It may seem lighter than, and it is lighter than like the major issues in the world, but notice how I'm still following my own rules of what I just told you in terms of, having paragraph structure and all that stuff. It's always weird though to do that because I feel like I'm showing off to them, and I'm not trying to. I'm just kind of trying to like practice what I preach. So I'm like, hey, here's something I wrote. If you've heard of this site, cool, but I'm not expecting you to.
Yeah, I can only imagine the little snickers that come out there when they find out that the different kind of publications that you work for as well too, and it's just like I imagine some the kids that you work with aren't necessarily into metal or the case like that, and then they find out like all the work that you've done with progressive music, metal music, all the reviews that you do.
Yeah, it's always nice when somebody has like heard of it. There's been a few students over the years that I've actually kind of kept in touch with because they're into this music, and they always want to discuss it with me, and they want to go back and forth. I just discovered this album, have you heard of this band? And it's always nice to try to make that connection with them because they come in seeing you as, if not like the authority, then at least kind of like a pain in the butt obligation. So I always try to kind of break that wall and say like, hey, I'm just a guy. This is a job. I like what I'm doing, but I'm just a person. Let's talk about other stuff. It's always interesting too. I don't know if they. I mean, I don't know how old I look to them. I'm barely 34, but it's always interesting when they are surprised that like I know about video games, that I know about YouTubers, that I watch some of the same stuff they watch. It's always like I'm your professor, but I'm just a guy, hanging around into the same stuff you are. Like, let's bond over our interests.
Yeah, and when you can get those kind of connections like that, I mean, it can really help with the message that you're trying to teach as well. And when they have those interests and they see the outside things that you do outside of class, and they can have that kind of interest as well too. I mean, I think that can really help so much, and it's great to see that you are like honest and open about all of that too. And there needs to be more of that as well too.
Yeah, I mean, one of the rules of like teaching that, every teacher probably gets told is don't, I think it's actually like a kind of common phrase is like, don't let them see you smile until Christmas, which is basically means like, don't put down your guard, like, don't let them break that barrier of authority. And my perspective is like, as long as they respect you, as long as they do what they're supposed to, they don't look at you like you're an idiot. Why not be friendly with them too? Like, why not bond with them and make jokes and kind of show that you're down to earth? Because it also helps with the trust element too. Like, if they don't want to do this, if they don't want to be in this class for, hypothetically, at least like bond with them so they can kind of see that you're just a person doing your job, and it makes it easier for them, I think, to get into it and to really feel open about like whatever trouble they're having, whatever they're excited about.
Oh,
There was one time where I saw a student at a local, I'm in Philly, so a local place, for a great band called Riverside from Poland. And like the first day I was talking about music, I was like, hey, anybody know like Frank Zappa? Does anybody know Porcupine Tree? And he's like, yeah, I know all of them. And I was like, really? You've heard of Porcupine Tree? Get out of here. So I saw him at the concert, and he didn't know how to like react. He's like, hi, professor. And I'm like, no, I'm just Jordan here. It's cool. You don't have to like, we don't have this dynamic here.
oh,
That's fun.
Oh yeah, and it goes to prove that not everything needs to be that stern authority figure, and that can scare people off from wanting to go into a particular direction if that interests them in the first place. And sometimes just getting on that personal level, like you do, it can be so beneficial to future generations.
Yeah, I think there's like an idea of in any role, there's always the idea of like, how am I supposed to be? So, as you're like a teacher, how does a teacher act? And that was me for a little bit. Like, I remember my first semester was 2011. It was right out of grad school, and I got my master's. I had like a briefcase. I came in like a suit. I was like, I look like a teacher. I very quickly realized like this puts distance between me and the students, so they feel less connected. They feel like off, put off. And I'm just putting on this like front. Why don't I just be me? So then, I started dressing down a bit more, still wearing like dress shoes, but like a jeans and button up shirt.
Oh yeah, and
It's work, and they just want to be seen as people, and you want to be seen as a person. So I always even try to tell them like, don't think of me as like the teacher. Just think of me as somebody who knows a bit more about this, and I can help you.
oh, that again, that's such a great way to go about that, and I love that you do that. And yeah, and just again with like all the work that you do between teaching and reviewing and writing books and being able to go through discographies, and of course the mammoth one that that's gonna be released in book form at the end of the month with Opeth. I mean, the fact that you have time to be able to do all of this is just incredible.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it can be a struggle. It actually kind of reminds me of something that I think Stephen Wilson said years ago. I don't remember when, but I remember he kind of said like, I have things coming out all the time. So people ask me like, do I sleep and do I eat and all that? And I guess it's to a much less degree. I guess it's the same for me because like today, for example, I had four things that went up. And it's also like trying to like space it out in terms of sharing it and not just shoving it at people. But I think it's always the idea of like, you get things done, but they may not go up for a week or two. So it kind of looks like you're doing a lot at once. And sometimes I am, but sometimes I'm not. It just kind of comes off that way. But yeah, it can be a struggle to balance it all and kind of take time for myself to just say, all right, I'm done for the day. I'm just gonna like relax. I don't have to, keep the hustle going.
Oh, for sure. But of course, uh getting into the main focus here of especially why I wanted to be able to bring you on and be able to promote the work that you're doing is, of course, this retrospective on Opeth up to this point, which, it's amazing how you can go with your last book with Dream Theater and how many albums they have and how many layers a band like that can have. And then you go into a band like Opeth, who has so many albums, so many different layers behind them, such a big progression that really happened within the band and seeing them change. I mean, it's awesome to see that you're able to tackle something like Dream Theater and then go into something like Opeth, where there are a lot of similarities, but there are so many differences as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like you always have to judge bands by what they're trying to do and how successful are they at what they're doing. So there's certainly like, it's almost like apples and oranges to a degree. But again, like I would say, and this is going to sound like it's insulting to Dream Theater maybe, but like Opeth get very technical as well. They're like, expert players, even though Michael Ackerfeld's very kind of self-deprecating, that's just part of his personality. He maybe today he would say he's a great guitarist and a great singer, but when they started and for a while he wouldn't. But I think everything that they do, even if it's the most, like you pick out like the most complex arrangements, it's always serving the songwriting. It's always serving the mood. They never get technical just for the sake of getting technical, which I think a lot of progressive bands do. And that's one of the big criticisms of prog in general is like, does this need to be that complicated? Or are you just showing off? I don't think Opeth's ever shown off. I think they always do it for a purpose.
And thinking about that as well too, I mean, especially with the music that you grew up on and being able to discover outside music as well too, like when you discovered Opeth, I mean, were you already familiar with like the death metal side of music? I mean, was that your first exposure? I mean, for me, Opeth was like the very first time that I ever heard growls that I could appreciate. I mean, was there anything like that for you as well?
I'm pretty much the same way. And as a matter of fact, I almost sometimes feel like an imposter in like the metal community because I don't like straightforward death metal. I really don't like straightforward metal in general. I usually need some kind of like acoustic break or some kind of like odd thing. Like even like I just reviewed the new album by Voivod, I think is how you say it. It could be
Oh
wrong
yeah.
and sounding like an idiot, but I think that
Oh
it's
yeah, it's
Voivod.
Voivod.
So like I'm not into thrash metal, but because they're progressive, they do weird things. They kind of almost get like surf rock with it. That appeals to me. And the first time I ever heard Opeth, I remember they were touring with Porcupine Tree. It was Damnation in Absentia tour, and high school was Porcupine Tree to me. That like was blew my mind when In Absentia came out and all. So I was like, all right, who's this band Opeth? I've seen them all around a lot, but I've never heard them. And I remember YouTubing White Cluster from Still Life, and I hated it. I was not into the vocals. I could not get into it. Um, and it took a while for me to kind of get adjusted to it and to start to hear the growling as part of like as another instrument and to hear the melody within the growling and to kind of be able to hum along with the growling and not just hear it as like garbage disposal vocals or something. And the same thing with other bands like Between the Buried and Me. I hated when I first heard them, and then it just like kind of clicked. But there's still so many bands with growling like that that just don't do anything for me because they don't go elsewhere with it.
Oh, I can completely understand, and that was kind of my gateway into prog. Like when I first started getting into music, like so many people of my generation, and especially being in a small town, I thought Metallica was like the heaviest thing on the planet. I didn't think anything was like that could top that. And then all of a sudden, 2003 came around, and I heard Saint Anger, and I thought, there's got to be other kinds of music out there, and I always gravitated towards And Justice for All because I liked the fact that they did different odd time signatures. So I was looking for
Yeah.
bands that did something like that. And I remember distinctly the very first two albums that I bought outside of Metallica were Train of Thought and Deliverance. I bought them on the same day, and I immediately always kept listening to Train of Thoughts. And I listened to like a little bit of Deliverance, and I just could not listen to it anymore. And then about like 6 months later, I gave it one more shot. I think it was like playing on Xbox or something. I just decided to put on Deliverance, and just like everything clicked with me finally, and I was able to start appreciating the heavier sides of music like that. I love the fact that they were able to go into time signatures, but it made sense in the song structures. And just like you said, they don't show off for showing off sake. Like anytime that they do something that's outside the norm, it always has a purpose.
Yeah, and I think it just goes into like Ackerfeld's artistry and his integrity. Like that's the thing about it, is that he's not in it for the money, for the fame. He's in it because he's an artist. And he's like said repeatedly, as like any Opeth fan knows, and you know, that if there's ever a point where he doesn't feel creative anymore, he will stop the band. Like he's not doing it as a job. And I think so many artists in general do it because they, you know, they become part of the machine. It's not because they're still passionate about it. I mean, he like threw away, you know, after Watershed, he threw away a whole, pretty much like a whole album, because Mendez is like, you're doing the same thing again. You got to change it up. And he's like, oh shit, you're right. Let me do Heritage, and kind of, you know, polarize the audience, but for the sake of art.
Oh yeah, and that's why he quit Bloodbath. Like he didn't want to do death metal anymore. It's just like being able to have that integrity, and rather than just like putting out a half-assed album just to appease one side of your fan base, rather than writing something that actually means something to you, being able to reach a new audience, and just being able to make the music that you want to create rather than feeling like you have to create. I find that to be so important.
Yeah, and staying true to like your guns, and be whatever negativity be damned. Like that's another big thing I'm critical of with like fans of progressive music. And this is, I say this on like every podcast, every interview I do, because I really want to spread the message of like, people think that their opinions on this stuff matter more than they do. And there's like an entitlement to it that always just kind of annoys the hell out of me, of like, if and in the book I get into it, and like Heritage is far from my favorite Opeth album. I always kind of say it's like, to me it sounds like a lot of demos for a new style that they then capitalized on with Pale Communion, which I think is a masterpiece, and I will defend that to my dying day. Pale Communion is incredible. um but like, if you don't like Opeth's change in direction, don't listen to them anymore. But like, Michael Ackerfeld doesn't care, and to his credit, he doesn't care. It's like, I want to do this now, and if I gain some fans, great. If I lose some fans, that's a shame. But like, that's the definition of being an artist, is going where your muse takes you. And you don't have to like it to respect it. I think there's a difference there that a lot of people can't reconcile. It's like, all right, you don't like the album, you have the other albums, don't listen to it, listen to the next one. And I've seen so many people on, like, I mean, it's the internet in general. It's just people having the soapbox. But I've seen so many people say, "Oh, I'm never buying an Opeth album again," or "I'm never buying, the Stephen Wilson album again." And it's like, who cares? So don't. Like, they're not gonna shed a tear because they lost a fan. Like, get over yourself.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was kind of an
exactly.
off-topic answer, but
Oh no, I think it completely fits as well too. I mean, I would rather have like authentic music that isn't for me than half-ass music that's trying to appeal to me, because
yeah,
that's not going to work.
yeah. And it's like, I just like, I think people feel like a sense of ownership over the music, which makes sense. I mean, we're the fans, we support it, we go to the concerts, we write about it, we grew up with it. There is that like level of connection to it, but it's like, it's not the end of the world if you don't like this artist's new album. Like, don't act like you're betrayed. They betrayed you. How dare they? It's like, it's just music. It's just an album.
And the great thing about 2022 is almost every single artist who's ever existed, their music is out there somewhere for you to be able to enjoy. So if you do enjoy the heavier side of Opeth, there are bands that can do that progressive death metal side that you might appreciate as well too. I mean, there was bands doing that before Opeth, like Edge of Sanity, that you might be into, or just going into other areas, like if you like the blend of like the progressive folk rock and the progressive death metal. There's stuff like that out there for you too. Or just listen to the original Opeth albums because they still exist. They're not going away just because they change styles.
Yeah, I mean, I think Opeth is the best at what they do. Um, like there's so many bands that go for a similar thing, but like classic Opeth cannot be beaten, but that's just it. And the funny thing is with the whole like controversy, I guess, about modern Opeth, even though it's been 10 years that they've been doing this, is like the threads of this more like jazzy, jazz fusion, progressive rock style has been embedded in their music forever. Like the earliest albums have jazzy like bass playing, and he openly says like Damnation is inspired by Camel, which especially ending credits, it's clearly Camel. So it's like, where have you been that you haven't heard these other influences in their music from the get-go?
Yeah, I mean they've had Mellotron for how many albums now before they went completely prog rock? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not outside of what they've been doing, and they've always hinted at it. And again, it's just like not every single album since the watershed moment of changing their sound, it has appealed to me, but there are albums that they've done since then that really hit home. Like you mentioned, like with Pale Communion, is I find that to be absolute perfection at what they're trying to do as well. And it's so great to see a band like that is not afraid to be able to go in that direction after like being known so much for their death metal side, and just showing that people can change, people can evolve.
Yeah, I do wonder, like, again, I'm always fascinated in general with people, how people connect their identities to the things that they're interested in. I mean, it's like, it's always that phenomenon of, or not phenomenon, but just like that occurrence when you show somebody something you like and then you watch their reaction to it. And if it's like, if you don't laugh at this YouTube clip, does that mean you don't like me? Or if you don't like this song, does that mean you don't like me? And it's not that big of a deal. So I think a lot of like fans put their identity into progressive music or metal, and that becomes who they are. So it's like, if I admit that I'm okay without, the death vocals here, am I going against myself? Am I a traitor? And it's like, stop labeling yourself. Who cares? Like what you like. I mean, it's like, as you know too, people tend to think if like you write about this music, you listen to this music, you have podcasts about this music, that's all you are. And it's like, no, I listen to pretty much anything, and a lot of progressive music, clearly I'm critical of. So it's okay to like just like what you like and not worry about fitting into a box.
Exactly. And it's funny you bring that up because it instantly reminded me of totally blanking out on the name of the movie. And it was the Varg movie about the start of black metal and mayhem and everything. And I
Oh,
just,
Lords of Chaos.
yeah, Lords of Chaos, that the moment that Varg is wearing that Scorpions logo on his battle vest, and he just looks at me and it's like, what the fuck is that? And it's like, okay, well, I can't listen to Scorpions anymore if I want you guys to like me.
Yeah, and there's just so many overlaps between genres that people sometimes like don't get. Like again, Acker felt, he was into all the metal stuff, but he was also into like Joni Mitchell and Nick Drake. And it's like there's so much of it influences other things. And it all goes back in the sense of the Beatles, of course, but I don't know. It's like people think they're a poser or something. I mean, I've had friends, especially in college, who like ask me, why do you listen to like Tori Amos or Elton John? They're not heavy. And I'm like, well, I don't want it to be heavy. They're great songwriters, great musicians. If you can't expand it, then that's your problem. If you're sticking to such a rigid like box of what's good.
Oh, it's so true, and I've dealt with that so much. I mean, anytime that I've been in a band, like either the music that I listen to is either too progressive, or it's too death metal, or it's too poppy, or there's too many blast beats. Like it seems like at least around here in the Midwest, it seems like people are always looking for a reason to shit on your musical taste rather than try to find the connection, to be
Yeah.
able to bring people together. And I I think it's, it's just like that human instinct of always wanted to be able to have some kind of controversy in your life. I mean, some people need that in their lives. So, it's like if you can find that on a musical taste and constantly say, "Oh, that band's shitty. I've never liked them. How could you ever like them?" It's just like they got to build that up in their mind, and they have to like be able to proclaim that. And again, that's the beautiful thing about social media. Good and bad, people are able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it all goes into like what they call like false consensus bias of this is good to me. How come you don't think it's good? Or you think this is funny? I think this sitcom sucks. um, so like for example, I mean, like I love early Panic at the Disco. I adore like No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom, Return of Saturn. I think those are great albums. And I'm actually working on a piece now on Linkin Park's A Thousand Suns, which I always felt like it's their least liked album. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I don't even really consider myself a fan of Linkin Park overall, but I love that album. I think that album's incredible. And I've listened to that album dozens of times. I think it's a flawed masterpiece. And yeah, like I'm writing a defense of it of like, why A Thousand Suns it deserves more credit than it gets for being like a profound conceptual statement and not just, something to throw away.
Yeah, and I've always seen that bias against that album too. I think it's because again, it's just like the fan base wanted the band to go into one direction and they decided to go into a different direction. Just like bringing it back to Opeth, like they wanted one style but they got a different style, so they can't, either they don't want that change or they can't handle that change. And it's just like they don't even give the new material a fair shots, and sometimes they
Yeah.
do, but it's just like when you can find something like A Thousand Suns and you're able to appreciate it for what it is, like you said, it's like it's a flawed masterpiece, like not everything's perfect, but if you can still go through it and enjoy it for what it is, then it's great art.
Yeah, well, that's just it. Like, I'm not even, I've heard the first two Linkin Park albums, which everyone thinks are the best. I'm not like, I didn't grow up with that. I remember like hearing some of the songs on the radio of that really early stuff. Um, and Minutes to Midnight, I like, but Thousand Suns just to me is incredible because it's more than just a collection of songs. Like it's not even until the third track that you even get a proper song. The first two tracks are just like build up. And I love conceptual continuity. I love when things come back at the end of an album and you get a reprise. Like that automatically kind of gets points with me. But they have like these sound bites. And you have like the whole thing about the many arms of Vishnu and I have become death. And it's like there's weight to what they're doing here. And there's that one piece, wisdom, justice, and love that like yeah, this you could argue this could be another song. They're wasting time or something, but it's like no, this is a singular statement. This is a piece of art. This is not just a bunch of tracks to play on the radio. Um, and I'm not saying everyone should like that, but that's definitely an album that I defend as like this is profound and it needs more credit than it gets.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to reading up on that when that goes live. I mean, again, it's just like I've mentioned it before, and I got to say it again. It's just like being able to see your point of view on things like makes me think differently, even whether we agree or disagree on a band or a genre or an album or whatever the case is. I love being able to hear different sides of an album and different people's perspectives because it's something different than my own, and it's just like it makes me think differently. So without really giving A Thousand Suns a fair shot, I don't think I've gone through the whole album. Like I'm very curious to see what your thoughts are, and it just might intrigue me to be able to listen to the whole album and see it from your perspective.
Yeah, thanks. I hope so. Yeah, I mean, I just like I'm a sucker for like good transitions between songs, and it's one of those albums where like if you're listening to it as you're driving down like an empty like highway and it's like empty on the road and it's late at night, it puts you in this whole like universe, and you have like the synths segueing and you get like the major songs that kind of get you like hyped up, but then it kind of dissipates into like another lull, and it's an interesting, I don't know, it's like they didn't give fans what they expected, but they went for something more, and inherently that's more polarizing. Anytime you go for something that's a little more like less conventional from what you're used to and what people expect, you're going to polarize your fan base more. But that's ultimately, again, like the job of being creative is to say something more than, what you have been maybe.
Absolutely. And again, just like going back into the work that you do, that's why I admire so much of what you do. I mean, whether you're doing an article, whether you're doing a full write up, whether you're doing a whole book on a retrospective of a band, I mean, you're able to give those insights, you're able to give that full perspective of whatever that case is. And, just being able to see those different sides and being able to go into that. And again, just like with all the publications that you work for, being able to do stuff on your own, being able to teach the way that you do. I mean, there's so much to admire about what you do, and it's great to see all the success that you have, all the companies that hire you on and admire your work and love the work that you do, and of course the people, whether they agree with you or disagree with you, whether they shit on your thoughts, whether they praise your thoughts. I mean, you're getting people's attentions every time that you put out an article, and it's great to be able to see that talk happening. And I'm so happy to see like all of the work that you're able to do. I mean, considering I'm 33, and seeing all the work that you can do here at 34, it's just very inspiring. And being able to talk about all of this with you has just been a great time. And I just love the work that you do. And I thank you again for taking the time to be able to talk to me about all of it.
Thanks. That's so humbling for you to say, man. And I thank you for having me on, wanting to talk to me. Again, it's like it's always interesting to see how what I do looks from another perspective. Because as you know, like anybody who does it, like you're in the eye of the storm. So maybe it doesn't resonate with you as much as it does from the outside of like what you're doing and how much, I don't know, maybe it matters to people. I don't know. And it's like I know people who look up to what I do, and that's always great. And I always want to, like, if I can, inspire and help people. But then like I look at people that I kind of want to be like, and I want to get to their level. So it's kind of like a back and forth between all of us of trying not to measure yourself too much against others, because it's ultimately just kind of bad. But I'm glad, to know that you followed me and you're inspired by what I do and you appreciate it. And it gives me more encouragement to kind of believe in myself and to realize that I am doing things and there's an audience for it.
Yeah, I absolutely think that way as well too. I mean, again, with just like all the thoughts that you have, and obviously outside of music too. I mean, you're able to give your thoughts on other forms of entertainment, like gaming, movies, TVs, all that stuff. But obviously with the music, being able to hit so many people, so many publications caring about what you do. And speaking of that too, like where are people able to find your articles and the work that you do?
Yeah, so like I would say for the most part these days, I'm doing stuff for Loudwire, Metal Injection, Consequence, What Culture, and I'm an editor at Pop Matters, so I don't do as much like in front. I do more of like working on other people's articles there. And then every month I review an album or two for Prog Magazine in the UK. So I'll say those are the main places I'm at now. And yeah, the best place or the best idea is always just to kind of follow me on Facebook and on Twitter at just, Jordan Blum or Jordan Blum 87. I do have a website, but I haven't updated it in a long time. I probably should kind of use that more as like my hub. But I would say those are the places I'm at most these days.
Oh, awesome. Again, like so many great publications that care about the work that you do, and whether you're doing the writing, whether you're doing the editing, or just sharing your thoughts online. I mean, I love being able to see your opinions on things. Again, whether we agree or disagree, like I'm always interested to see your thoughts on something that I'm interested in or I wasn't interested in. It's just like, again, it's great to be able to see those opinions, whether we agree or disagree. I always love seeing that stuff from you. I can't wait to be able to see all the stuff that you got going on in the future. And of course, the brand new book, plug that again, please.
Yeah, thanks again, man. I'm glad to know that you are interested in what I have to say, even if we don't agree. I mean, that's the whole idea of having a rational discussion is like, we have different opinions on that, but we're not going to be mad at each other. It's not
Exactly.
that big of a deal. But yeah, so it's the Opeth book On Track. It's by Sonic Bond Publishing. They have a whole series. I think they do have over 100 now. I think by the end of the year they're going to have 150 of these On Track books. So this is my third one. Yeah, Opeth. It's coming out the 24th in the UK and the 29th of April in America. And I think the major places you could find it is through the official web store, which is Burning Shed, which, you know, any progressive rock fan knows Burning Shed. A lot of stuff comes through there. It's on Amazon. I've seen it in Barnes and Noble stores, which is kind of like surreal and mind blowing to see it on the shelf. But if not, it's available through the website of Barnes and Noble. I know like other places have it, but I don't think they're like official stores. They're kind of like secondary selling it. I don't know how. So I would definitely say like Burning Shed, Barnes and Noble, or Amazon are the main ways to get it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, again, I thank you so much for taking the time to be able to do this. I immensely enjoyed this conversation, being able to go through everything that you do, whether we got to talk a lot about it, whether we got to just briefly touch on it. I mean, there's a lot to be able to go over, but it was so great to be able to cover the grounds that you do, all the great work that you do. And I thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I didn't know it was going to be going this long, but I'm so happy it did because we covered so much ground.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm just always happy to talk about pop culture in general. And yeah, it's like it's always weird to talk about yourself. So I'm glad we kind of got to talk about mutual interest in like other things as well, and not just kind of me. But yeah, I'm always happy for the platform.
Oh yeah, I mean, no pun intended. I do love that stream of consciousness. Like I have nothing written down in front of me. I just like being able to have that conversation, listening to you, and then talking back. Just like wherever the conversation goes, it goes, and just making sure that I hit the points that I want to hit. But just let the conversation be real because just like you said, like not always wanting to be able to talk about yourself, and just being able to talk about other things. Whether we go into a Nick Cage tangent or whatever the case is. It's I always enjoy those things.
Me too. Yeah. I mean, like we both do lots of interviews, and those are the best interviews. Is like where you want to go, what you have to hit on. But the best thing to do as an interviewer, if anybody's listening who wants to kind of get into it, is just to be able to bounce off of the other person and just wherever they take it, you got to follow and be able to. And I think you definitely do. And those always make the best interviews to listen to.